Hi everyone, I'm Jerome from the Art Science Museum. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for a nice little chat with Zai Tang on his latest commission with us titled Sonorous Sketches, Visualizing a Field Recording Dubplate. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Zai, he's an amazing artist based in Singapore whose work revolves around what it means to listen during a time of an ecological crisis and mass extinction. He experiments with the abstraction and visualization of sounds recorded in wildlife-rich habitats under threat in Singapore and merges the diverse disciplines in creating immersive experiences. His works have been featured in the second Yin Chuan Biennale, Singapore Biennale, Singapore International Film Festival, and most recently the Busan Biennale. And like the two wonderful artists and filmmakers commissioned by the Art Science Museum before him, which is Lei Yuanbin and Eva Tang, Zai's commission is also rooted in the fact that they're actually creating during a time where traditional filmmaking has become challenging and logistically tedious and also almost impossible. And despite that, we've been absolutely bowled over by the quality of work, the nuanced responses, and creative resilience that these artists have showcased. And we've been super proud to be able to support them as well as provide a platform for them to showcase their lovely work these last few months. And where you've seen a masterclass of creative editing and nimble coordination between voice acting, sound design, and subtle sleight of hand directing from the previous two commissions, it is with Zai's Sonorous Sketches that we see a really marked shift in style and approach. And for those of you who have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm sure you've all got burning questions for him, which we will get to in a really short while. Let's give a warm welcome to the artist of the hour, Zai Tang.
Hello.
Hello, Zai.
Hi, Jerome.
Hello. Could you give us a brief background and context for your newest work and how working with Rei Hayama came about?
Right. Well, yeah. So as some people might know, I've been making many field recordings in Singapore for many years, and one place where I spent quite a lot of time initially was Bukit Brown. So this work emerged from a dubplate record that I got made in 2013 that had recordings from Bukit Brown pressed onto it. So I got that made sort of like as a test cut before I made a final work using another dubplate. So I had it spare, and I decided to use it for various sort of performances where I was improvising with it, and sometimes in quite a destructive manner. So yeah, over the 7 years of its existence, this dubplate has degraded quite a lot. And started to kind of have all these artifacts of the medium and deterioration of the wildlife calls on it. So I was really interested in this quality of the sound, of how it affected the sound, the calls themselves, and also the dubplate and its artifacts. So that was really the starting point of like finding the impetus to then sort of visualize. So yeah, I took the 10 short excerpts from this dubplate record and re-recorded it, sometimes a bit slower than the original speed, sometimes a bit faster. And then with these 10 clips, Ray and I both responded to them in different ways. So with myself, I used a lot of sort of hand-drawn frame-by-frame techniques in the digital domain, and Ray worked with 35mm film, painting it and using paint stripper and other means of kind of creating a sort of stream or flow of images. Yeah, so that was really a bit of an overview of the piece and how it came about.
And how did you arrive at animating these recordings?
You mean in terms of approach?
Approach, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess like I've been really interested in visualizing sound for a long time and sort of exploring different ways of experimenting with that process. So for this particular project, like it was a great opportunity to experiment with something I was aware of but wasn't familiar with myself. So yeah, as I mentioned, this sort of I was really fascinated by this frame by frame technique that you can actually do in like Photoshop. Because also Photoshop has like quite a lot of different brushes, you can get quite varied and organic kind of strokes. So yeah, like I sort of treated this as an experiment with like using this method of doing frame by frame animation, which I haven't really done before this way anyway. So yeah, and for Rei, I guess like I tried to, because I had an idea that maybe she could respond with, you know, the analog medium of film to the sort of character of the dub plate itself, you know, the sort of crackle and hiss and pops that emerge on the surface. But she also sort of responded to the sorts of some of the sort of ambiences and feelings of associated ideas to do with the creatures that were recorded, or the spaces that they were recorded in, which I shared with her too. So yeah, then the final stage was figuring out how to combine the two in a bit of a sort of flurry towards the end of the project. But yeah, it was certainly an exciting process.
Yeah, it sounds like a really, really long, almost tedious, but very rewarding process, of which I'm sure you've spent a lot of time on. And I mean, just on that note, because when we approached you to do this was during the period of time where everyone was on lockdown, or the circuit breaker, as we call it. So how do you think that being in that situation affected the way you approach your work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just meant, like, for all of the collaborative projects that I had, just had to work completely remotely. So that was something to adapt to. And in fact, this is the second time Rei and I collaborating. The first time was also during this year, where we collaborated on a work for the Busan Biennale. But we made that completely remotely as well, and just kind of sort of sent things back and forth and talked things through and let the ideas emerge over the several months we worked on. So similarly for this, we sort of worked a little bit more separately. There was slightly less dialogue in between, because I think we already developed a sort of creative rapport where we could just trust each other to work with the idea. Yeah, I suppose that's been my creative experience of COVID for all the projects I've had with other people. It's been sort of doing it, you know, completely in your own space, and via digital communication. Yeah.
So generally not that much different from how you usually approach creating in general, yeah?
I mean, yeah, certainly for like my solo stuff, yeah, I'm always in my own head. But when I collaborate, of course, like it's best to kind of get together and work stuff out that way. Yeah.
And so diving right back into your work, so most of your works were from the 2013 to 2015 recordings that were done mostly in Bukit Brown. And a lot of these recordings were also done in the rail corridor in MacRitchie and some forests near Mandai. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, well, I guess a good place to start is like, why did I kind of get drawn to those places? I think for Bukit Brown, it was, I mean, I felt like that particular place had a certain sort of something I couldn't quite describe in terms of an atmosphere about it, at least back then, that sort of always drew me back there. And every time I went there, I kind of experienced very different and to my ears new bird calls and species of other creatures too. So it was really a sort of very immersive experience of getting to know a place, of a wild place in Singapore through listening over, you know, several months' time. So yeah, it affected me, and I wanted to kind of capture my experience, I suppose, through recording the sounds of that place. And of course, you know, during that time we we found out that the highway was going to be built. So it was a chance to sort of maybe document or kind of create an impression of what this space sounded like, you know, as reference for the future when the highway would be coming in. And of course, like after Book It Brown, I recorded in many other locations, as you mentioned, usually for different projects and for different reasons. But certainly, I guess the sort of most enjoyable and enlivening thing about listening and field recording is that kind of practice of sort of tuning in, you know, to the sounds and the other creatures around you. Which I still find, you know, kind of quite moving sometimes, and also just really interesting sonically. You know, there's a wealth of sounds that we often ignore, and those places are great for listening, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing, because of all the places that you have recorded in, I've actually been to none of them.
Oh, okay.
And to be able to you know, when I see a place like, say, for example, Mandai Forest Reserve or Bukit Brown, it's not immediately some place that I'll actually go to have a walk around naturally. But I think the most amazing thing about your work is that for me to be able to rediscover, or not even rediscover, to just even discover these places and just to hear how vibrant it sounds. And I think a lot of the time, you know, it's sometimes like a place like these places, they look deceptively simple, but there's actually quite a lot going on. So was it your intention to experiment with ways to uncover what's hidden visually? And how do you actually prescribe what images and motions to match a particular sound in these sort of settings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess like for me, there is definitely something in the act of visualizing these creatures that often I don't see, you know, because they're kind of hidden within the sort of thick sort of foliage and flora of these various places. So there is that aspect of like the sense of that creature and its and, you know, a sort of some kind of essence of its being is like expressed through sound. So when I think about trying to visualize the expressions of these creatures, it's like, for me, it's like trying to tap into an aspect of their being or their existence, you know. And I guess in terms of the actual approach, like how do I try and visualize it? I tend not to like kind of prescribe a particular way of approaching it, like that I apply across all my projects. I guess I tend to experiment with different methods. So like in past, I've worked a lot with spectrograms, and then using spectrograms, which are like a sort of detailed visual imprint of a sound that's created digitally. Using that data to then sort of as my visual material to then like abstract and create animations with, for example. But you know, I do very much enjoy the sort of more hands-on responsive way of working too. So I'll still analyze a bit when I'm listening to a sound. So like I'll say try and tune into its texture. Maybe it's sort of like how the melody sort of creates a kind of feeling or a gesture in time. And various other aspects of like how it transforms, I guess. And I use that as a sort of baseline way of trying to perceive it, and using the things like, does it sound kind of gritty, for example, or is its call very like sharp and staccato? I can use those kind of things to then think of the kind of marks that might express that. Or is something a bit more like kind of flowing and like curved, for example, as its pitch glides, you know, over time. So yeah, there's different ways to sort of think about it, but none of it for me like is very fixed. I like to kind of be quite subjective when I approach it, to allow different possibilities to kind of emerge. yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it also leads to more questions. So, like, say for example, you're standing there, with the recorder, and when you're listening and absorbing these sounds, do you actually start visualizing what you might potentially do later, or do you actually record first, be in the moment, and then later go back, replay that everything that you've recorded, and then the process begins from there? How does how yeah.
Usually the latter. I think when I'm in the moment, I just try and focus on getting a good recording and being with the sounds of whatever creature sort of like I'm focusing on. So it's really back in the studio where I start to kind of engage, like visualizing it, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool, because even when watching it, there's a certain sense of, there's a very high rewatchability to that, because every time you watch it, you sort of discover something new. And then people get to also kind of invent their own narrative from soaking in this really immersive cocoon of sounds, almost like legally tripping out. So kudos to you for that, for creating an experience for everyone. So I would imagine that this would be difficult in a way to communicate to Rei as well, right? Because Rei has never been to any of these places. So in terms of your collaboration with her, how do you, was it solely communicating, giving her free rein to work on that, or some kind of explaining needed context given to Rei as well to work on this?
Yeah, I guess like, so how I initially kind of invited her to work on this with me was to focus on like visualizing the character of the dubplate and the sound of the dubplate itself, right? Initially, but then I also realized that might be a bit restricting. So she asked if for some additional things that maybe I could either associate or remember about where I recorded. So so I started to kind of also compile some memories of what I could recall from when I was making each recording, as well as some of the associations I think of how that particular feeling was when I was there, and some additional notes on maybe like how the dubplate sort of qualities felt. And then she went off with that and found her own way to respond to it. Yeah, so it was a nice surprise, like finally receiving the footage. She showed me some stills along the way as she was working, but the sort of batch of the 10 sequences, kind of came to me, and I was really excited to work with them from there.
Yeah, very nice. I think the whole blend between digital and analog is just really cool to see up front like that. And I think we're just going to open some questions to the audience, and I think we already have one from Tan Zhao Ong. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrongly. So he says, "Hello, interesting and captivating work. Very nice to hear out your thought process too. Why the dubplate? Is there anything more that you are intending to achieve or realize other than the blending of sounds?"
The dubplate itself, well, I guess, the reason why I have been working with dubplate records over the years is because they deteriorate with time, you see. So when I've used them like for installations as well, over the course of a show, as the record is played, it will sort of degrade, and there's something of that degradation that also for me like sort of reflects a certain aspect of how the soundscapes of these places that are sort of threatened by different sort of forms of urban development, how that change sort of alters the soundscape. So I'm trying to like kind of create a bit of a mirror through the choice of the medium, if that makes sense.
And we have another question from Valerie Gerard. So I think most people are curious what a spectrogram is. And the question is also, are you meaning the JS plugin? I have no idea what that is.
JS plugin? Oh, I don't know what that is also.
Well, I think maybe you could just explain a little bit more of what a spectrogram is. Actually, I don't really know as well.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So basically, a spectrogram. So you might be familiar with like a waveform, right? An audio waveform, which will give you information of time and amplitude or volume, right? But a spectrogram gives you time, amplitude, and frequency. So essentially, it gives you an extra layer of information which can show you different aspects of the sound that a waveform can't. Like, for example, if you've got, say, okay, so like there's a bird called a common hill miner here, whose call is like, oh, that's just two of its calls. But like, if you put that through a spectrogram, you'll see like over time it kind of goes, or because like it's showing you the frequency or pitch change over time. So yeah, one way I describe it is like it gives you a detailed visual imprint of a sound, and you can adjust the resolution to zoom into those details. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question, and it's not overly geeky, but it probably is.
Not at all. I think that's why everyone is here, is to learn more about your amazing work. And I think it's cool that there's this technology that sort of allows you to also initially visualize what the sound kind of looks like as well. And I think as a good framework for you to approach how to animate or some of the stuff that you have recorded too. And just also on that vein of your recordings locally here in Singapore. So Singapore is not just the only country you have done stuff in. You were based in the UK for a while. So could you also maybe let us tell us a little bit more about the similar things that you have done back in the UK?
I guess, yeah. Well, I guess like, mostly growing up in the UK, the sort of underground music and rave music was a massive part of my life. It still is in a different kind of way. Like, I still love listening to some good beats and bass lines, But yeah, I guess in terms of like my own work, it was probably around about the time when I was doing my master's that I started to explore working with field recordings in more depth. So like I could tell you about one project that I did, which is called Sonorous City, where I recorded parts of journeys which all stemmed from the River Thames. And I did one journey north and one journey south from a number of bridges along the Thames. And so I gathered all of like this sort of like meandering map of sound from the city from around 2008, 2009, and I made an installation with that where you would walk into this darkened space. One person can go into this space, and you're greeted by like sand and pebbles all collected from around the River Thames, and there's just like a blue light kind of reflected from a mirror from a projector, like illuminating a seat in the middle of the space. So it sort of encourages you to sit down, but when you sit down, that light slowly shuts off, and then you're just plunged into the dark. And from there, the rest of the experience happens sonically for as long as you're comfortable. As soon as you get up, the light comes back on. But what happens is you're transported from the sort of soundscape of the Thames to different parts of London's sort of urban sprawl, but just through sounds that I'd recorded there. So I guess making that work actually made me realize how much potential there is in working with field recordings for sort of that aspect of sound conjuring worlds and images in a very sort of maybe an instinctual way. Yeah. So it was a good starting point for me to kind of continue this thread of working with field recordings, I guess. Yeah,
where it all began. And that is
Yeah.
super cool. Would you ever consider doing something similar in Singapore?
Yeah, maybe there's something in the pipeline, but I can't quite say yet because it's not public. But
Nice,
yeah, there'll be something. So yeah, keep your ears
nice,
peeled.
nice. So Zai, we have one more question from the audience from a Rachel. What was your most
Mm.
memorable collaboration?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's been loads that I've felt and learned so much from. I think working with everybody, all the musicians that I collaborated with for Spectres Live for the Open a few years ago. Yeah, that was brilliant because I mean, of course they're all friends of mine, so it's always really lovely to work with your friends. But like I really look up to them as brilliant musicians. So having a chance to kind of work and learn from how they sort of approach working with sound in a live improvised manner was really inspiring, and I think kind of opened up a lot of possibilities for me to I guess like really delve into sound in a different way in that live context. But I guess since I don't sort of play live as much as like most actual proper musicians do. I always feel like working with people who are very sort of well accustomed and practiced for that situation. Yeah, you can absorb so much, and I certainly did with that project. So that was very enlightening in different ways, I think. Yeah.
Nice. And I think that's pretty much it for the artistic questions for your work. I think a lot of our viewers are also quite curious about your personal life. So we've got this little section of rapid fire questions that I'm going to ask you right now. And let's begin with, you have a deep love for DJing. So what's your go-to groove to dive into?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for early 2000s and late 90s drum and bass. So I still listen to that now. Yeah, sometimes.
And the dream director and artist to work on your next audio work?
Oh, wow. Okay. On my next audio work. Ah, okay. Right. Can we come back to that? I need a bit of time to process.
Sure.
Too many people.
A pint with a director or artist dead or alive. Who?
Ah, okay. I'll say David Lynch and
David Lynch.
Pint of ice cream. Yeah.
Pint of ice cream.
Yeah.
Wonderful. For those of you who don't know, we're also showing David Lynch's short films next month at the Art Science Museum as part of our horror season. So look out for that. And have a pint of ice cream with Zai as well, who might be there. You will be, right?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Okay. What is the best beverage to watch your micro short with?
Oh, something refreshing. I would say a nice. I mean, it can be an alcohol-free cocktail or some other fancy cocktail of your choice.
Very vague on the details, Zai.
Yeah, sorry.
What's the worst beverage to watch this micro short with?
Oh, worst one. I don't know. Probably absinthe. It's never a good idea.
Absolutely. And this next question ties in with another question from the audience from Crystal Go. Is there anything that you're currently exploring through your art now?
Right. Yeah. In terms of something that I'm working on, I'm actually sort of developing this Sonorous Sketches into something that will be part of a bigger installation that I'll be doing. It's early days yet, but I'm taking some of the ideas and approaches that I practiced for this and carrying it forward. In a similar vein to kind of create a sort of experience of sound visually. So we can sort of feel something from these creatures in a different way. Yeah.
And we're all going to be waiting in anticipation. And the last question. So 3 words to those who haven't caught your micro short.
Okay. I'd say listen in closely.
That's a good one. It's all about the audio recordings. So Zai, thank you so much for coming into the Four Art Science on Screen for this collaboration and trusting us with your presentation of work. We really appreciate you for being here tonight. So Zai,
my pleasure. Thank you.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share with anyone? I kind of feel like Sean Evans from Hot Ones about this, but you have the floor is now yours to share with everyone upcoming exciting works that you're going to showcase aside from the Busan Biennale work.
Well, there is. I do have one collaboration that I'm working on, which is going to be launched at the end of this year, and some people might be familiar with it. It's a migrant ecologies project led by Lucy Davis, and we're making a film with Daniel Hui, who is helping us to edit some of our footage of Tangling Halt and the rail corridor, which we created a quite expansive work with many years ago. But we're revisiting it and reimagining it as a short film. So we intend to kind of launch that at the end of this year. So that's something I'm very excited about.
Oh, nice. Where should we look up for that?
There'll be a link for it on the Migrant Ecologies website. Yes. But yeah, we might keep certain aspects of it not completely public yet. But we'll certainly update on there when it's ready. Yes.
Yeah. For everyone else, I think you can follow Zai on Facebook and Instagram as well on his adventures and next projects. I believe for his Instagram handle is @zai.tangent, TANGENT. Is that correct? And you can also follow Zai on Facebook for all this other new exciting and upcoming work. And now for our own shameless plug. So if you've thoroughly enjoyed today's session or are keenly interested to find out more about what's fresh and good in the realm of moving images, follow us on our Art Science on Screen page on the Art Science Museum website as well. And our next micro commission will feature local artist Gladys Ng, who will be working with poet Zoe Tania and musician Vivian Ko on an exciting new moving image work of cosmic proportions. And of course, right now we have this amazingly sobering and relevant exhibition on the effects of climate change titled Planet or Plastics. So please drop by at the museum on site and check that out too. And that's all. Thank you, Zai. Thanks for coming. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.